In 2013, the Senate Judiciary Committee convened hearings across Pennsylvania to explore the question of whether equal access to justice has been achieved for representation of poor people in civil law problems. Chairman Stuart Greenleaf kicked it off.
The reason for this hearing is to explore the need for adequate funding for those individuals that are engaged in litigation or a need for representation in the courts or civil courts of our Commonwealth. All too often, we find people that are going to court without counsel. I know in some areas it could be as much as 80% of those people that go to a particular area of the civil law and they have no counsel. It's a terrible situation we're dealing with. Justice is not being done because of it. And we thank all the individuals and the witnesses that are here today to testify and expand on this, to demonstrate what the consequences are for the Commonwealth, and hopefully to generate more support for the solution of this and the support for appropriations or legislation that will help to remedy it.
48 witnesses testified. The most compelling testimony came from low-income people who were helped by a legal aid program or who were not able to be helped. Many described what it was like to go without legal help and what it was like when they got help.
In 2005, my husband suffered a brain injury from a fall, which was we were able to make our payments, we were fine, but with his head trauma, it was a lot different. I was working full-time, ended up losing my job. And being diagnosed with needing a liver transplant. So there we both were. It ended up being some personal issues. We separated. We were trying to keep our home. I contacted the mortgage company numerous times. They would not talk to me due to my husband's name was on the loan. There was nothing I could do. I wrote letters stating he authorized me to be involved in the account. I had to contact, I had nowhere to turn, and I just felt hopeless. I turned to North Penn Legal Service, and today I say I thank God for Jen Heverly because I have a home.
The sad fact is that many in need of civil legal aid cannot get representation. Many Pennsylvanians assume there is a right to an attorney when a family faces a foreclosure of their home, or a person needs a protection from abuse order for her safety. Such a civil Gideon right has not yet come about in Pennsylvania.
The unfortunate and often tragic fact is that many Pennsylvanians face formidable legal situations in our civil courts, where those citizens may face dire consequences as a result of a civil legal matter that can greatly impact their lives or their futures. The vast majority of those citizens are left to fend for themselves in an unfamiliar courtroom without legal representation, simply because they cannot afford to hire an attorney to represent them. Our Constitution guarantees the right of a citizen to represent himself or herself before the courts of Pennsylvania if they so desire. But the question is, at what cost? Realistically, how can a person effectively defend himself or herself in the face of an often complicated legal challenge in a usually unfamiliar and daunting environment of a courtroom before a judge sitting there in a black robe? As a Commonwealth, we should be treating civil legal services for indigent individuals and families as an important government service, like roads, like police service, like the courts. There should be a dedicated, certain line item with equal application to every county for citizens facing serious civil legal situations.
Not only is the unrepresented person left to fend for him or herself, but judges must try to administer justice for people who often cannot properly present their case.
One of the vital issues relating to basic human needs are decided in the courts of common pleas. And we are a formal court. We are run by rules. The rules, when people come into that court, those rules apply equally to those who are represented and to those who are not. Also, as judges, we have ethical obligations. I can't, as the finder of fact in a case, be an advocate for someone who is unrepresented.
Deborah Culhane, senior staff attorney at Women Against Abuse Legal Center, presented her client's story.
So my client said, the picture I had of going into court was not what happened at all. When I went in for my first protection from abuse PFA hearing against my son's father, I was petrified and didn't know anything about it, except for what the judge and the woman in the waiting room told me. No one had ever told me to bring my witnesses, and I didn't know I could subpoena witnesses. These were people who had witnessed the abuse that I experienced, and I didn't know to have them available. At the hearing, my son's father had an attorney, but I didn't.
JR lost that hearing. Soon after, she found representation for her son's hearing and got the protection from abuse order.
On cases where they're unrepresented, are so serious sometimes that that I will send a member of the staff into the halls to try to find a pro bono lawyer just so that we could assure that some of the facts are in, because especially when they have children involved, we want to make sure that children are safe and their well-being is involved. And we not always successful in the hall, but we might have to continue that just to make sure that somehow they could get representation somewhere. Because when judges, you're in a case with witnesses who they have no idea of how to present evidence or witnesses, and you're sitting there saying, I'm not getting the full story no matter how it is. And there's a crisis in the legal system when you can't get the full story. And you don't get a fair and equal, the parties don't get a fair and equal share of justice.
It is the sad fact that the situation is getting worse. For many years, until just recently, the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network represented over 100,000 clients each year. Now that number is down to 85,000. And a study of the Legal Services Corporation found that for each person represented by a legal aid program, another person was eligible for services, asked for help, but had to be turned down. Unfortunately, reductions in legal aid staff have become a necessary response to cuts in legal aid funding.
When I first started, Lycoming, we represented Lycoming County, and we had 9 attorneys in our office, 2.5 paralegals. There were 2 other counties that were represented. Clinton County and Tioga County both had their own offices, their own attorneys, their own paralegals. Now, in 2013, the Williamsport office represents Tioga, Lycoming, and Clinton County out of the Williamsport office with 2 attorneys, 1.5 paralegals. So as you can see, the ability to deliver the legal services has been greatly reduced.
John Lovelace, an executive at UPMC Health System, made the business case for legal services.
We just would not be able to do the work we're able to do in being the largest Medicaid plan in Western PA without support of a variety of human service providers whose access is often supported by the work of public interest attorneys. So we're very supportive of the work people do. We're happy to be able to support it ourselves financially. We hope to see this kind of work spread. It really benefits the whole community as well as the people who we're enrolling and trying to serve. So,
for each dollar spent on legal aid, there is an $11 return to Pennsylvania and its residents. Funding for legal aid makes economic sense. And funding for legal aid helps keep our communities safe.
We in law enforcement have a stake in the health and welfare of the members of our communities. By addressing basic human needs such as housing, child custody, health care, and in fighting poverty and homelessness, civil legal aid helps make our families and our communities safer, more secure, healthier, and more stable.
So the question is, what can be done to address this situation? Many witnesses testified about the vital work that private attorneys across Pennsylvania do, by representing low-income clients on a pro bono basis. The legal profession contributes hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of free representation to low-income Pennsylvanians. There is an important and successful partnership between private lawyers and legal aid programs that makes this happen. The Civil Legal Justice Coalition submitted findings and recommendations in a report to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Key among those are two things that would make a difference. First, the coalition recommended an increase in funding for legal aid in Pennsylvania by $50 million annually. This increase would still not provide legal assistance to each person in need of representation. However, it would assure that at least for those eligible for services from a legal aid program and asking for help, the person would be represented, as opposed to the current state of affairs in which for each person represented, another person has to be turned away. Secondly, the coalition recommended the establishment of an Access to Justice Commission in Pennsylvania, as has been done in 31 other states. This commission would be a leadership body of court, legislative, bar, legal aid program, and client representatives, working together to forge solutions to the challenges surrounding access to justice for poor people.
So often we see clients who are living on the streets, and if you talk to them, they will tell you about the problems that they've had, and we know that if they had had an attorney by their sides with these legal proceedings, they would not be where they are.
Partial funding of legal aid, limited to just providing brief types of service, is not the solution. Consider this story told by Michelle Cohen, who is the supervising attorney for the Philadelphia Landlord-Tenant Legal Help Center, providing advice but not representation to tenants.
And this one woman came to me, and I took her receipts, I took the landlord ledger, and I reconciled them. And she could not understand the numbers at all. And when I figured them out, instead of owing $3,000, she was actually owed $500. I put this together to the landlord's attorney on an Excel spreadsheet, and I sent him an email. I said, she's cognitively impaired. She had a brain injury, cognitively impaired. She got to court. She signed agreement for $4,000. So she has to pay $800 a month. She's got to pay this $4,000. She's going to be homeless, and she is going to be homeless.
Not many people had ever given much thought, I don't think, in our profession, or even and especially in the public at large, as to a civil Gideon and whether that's a right. And we need to work toward that, and I think the Bar Association and your committee certainly, and this coalition that's been put together to steer these hearings, are doing a wonderful job of bringing to the forefront the need for a civil Gideon concept and perhaps a right, hopefully a right.
For the report of the Civil Legal Justice Coalition to the Senate Judiciary Committee, visit the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, Pennsylvania Bar Association, or Philadelphia Bar Association website.